Today we're going to look at the 1866 second Allen Springfield trapdoor converted rifle. What this is, I had an earlier video I did a few years ago that I had a 1866 Allen two-band, is probably the most easiest way to distinguish a short barrel rifle. This was a modification of the gun. It's actually a separate model. For some reason, when this gun was in service, they had to go and shorten the barrel length for some reason, and then they shortened the stock, and the gun went from having the 3 barrel bands to just 2 barrel bands. And in the stock, you can see where when they moved it down and cut the stock down, they plugged the hole for the band spring with an inlay. That was the other model I had. That, and in all of these, you really don't know what's original or what the government did or what a surplus rifle dealer did with it afterwards. The story on how this goes is, towards the end of the Civil War, there were already 2 or 3 different types of conversions to cartridge guns of the either the 1861 or the 1864 Springfield black powder musket. It was a percussion gun. And basically what it involves is you cut out the breech area and modify the hammer and the lock and make a type of either falling block, rolling or sliding. There are several different types, I mean. And it uses a cartridge now. So when the war ended, of course, like any war, they didn't know how long it would last. They were in production. They had a very large number of surplus muskets, parts and stuff already there at the Springfield Armory. And technology changed. Everyone was converting to cartridge guns. So the U.S. government had a problem, and they decided, well, we have to go with a cartridge gun. And there was an engineer at the arsenal, Allen, who came up with his plan to modify the muskets. He come up with his first design, which would be it'd be a 58 caliber rimfire. Let me see what year that was. It was 1865 model. And it was kind of a complex little mechanism. He used a 58 caliber rimfire. So basically all they were doing was just cutting out the back, putting a little chamber in there, and putting a device, this trapdoor breech device on there. And it didn't quite, they started with it, it didn't quite work out. And then the military was looking for ways to save money. Why they went from rimfire to centerfire was one general said, well, there's so much priming compound in a rimfire, and a centerfire cartridge uses like 1/6 of it. So the ammunition will be cheaper to manufacture, especially when you're manufacturing millions of rounds. So then they had one person said, you're going to change the design to centerfire. How they come up with the 5070, I'm not sure on the history of the cartridge, but the second design, and that's what this is, the model 1866, they took a percussion musket. They had a different style, they modified the first version, the second version, kind of simplified this breech mechanism, still has the musket style sight. And what they decided to do is to go from a 58 to a 50 caliber, and they would solder a liner, solder or weld, they say, I think it was soldered in, a liner into the original musket barrel, and then machine it out, and you had the 50-70 cartridge. You had this model, I believe the short model, and I don't know, rarely, I think there was a cadet model made. And this weapon was actually a percussion musket at one time, and it was converted over. When you get into the model 1868, those were purpose-built guns. They used up enough for what I think was happening is this model has had a short service life, and it had some problems. They had problems with the conversion not holding up well. The liners would come loose, some people say. Some people say they don't ever come loose, and they fire these guns and put all kinds of ammunition through them, and they're good. So you don't really know for sure, but maybe it was just easier to manufacture a purpose-built gun other than fooling around with this conversion. But these here were converted until we get to the model 1868. But the model 1868, the receiver and barrel was purpose-built, but they still used musket locks, plates, and parts, pieces. You know, I think the trigger guard was kind of the same, or a modified version. So you will find, you know, percussion musket parts on these guns for some years to come, and until we get into the models 1873 and after, which were 4570. So these early guns, basically this is what this is, and like I said, I had the other version, which was a shortened gun with 2 bands. This here's the full, it's 36 5/8 long barrel, so it's got the full length barrel, 3 bands, and the standard Allen second type trapdoor. And we'll take a closer look at the finer points of this. The thing about this gun, I bought it at an auction. I was fooling around, hitting minimum bids, just playing. And this is one of the ones by mistake I bought this gun. I really didn't like it. I didn't like the description. And it is a parts gun. The most difficult thing about the Allen second conversions is they were obsolete pretty quick in a few short years. And the government sold them off to surplus arms dealers or international arms dealers. Bannerman was one of the guys that would buy up anything the government sold in quantity. And they had skilled gunsmiths that would cobble together, you know, they'd buy stocks, parts, pieces, and they'd build guns from just leftover parts and pieces they'd buy at government auctions. So you get what you call your Bannerman guns. Now this gun also, I believe this gun was assembled from parts. And I'll tell you why as we go on and look at the gun. But another thing too is not only were they used in a short period of time and sold on an international market, a lot of these old obsolete guns also were used as drill rifles. So even though it started out like a military gun and everything, the surplus dealers would get them. And then military schools, some of these old guns, and even the foreign ones, will have a school's name carved in the stock or something. This gun was used as a drill rifle. If you ever find one that's nickel plated or chrome plated, probably is what it is. At the American Legion post, we have a Springfield trapdoor in a case. And the American Legion's been around since 1918, is when that veterans organization was founded. That gun was probably used on the color guard, because a lot of times you'll see a color guard will have chrome-plated guns, and the men carrying the 3 flags and the 2 riflemen on the end will have chrome-plated helmets. Kind of add the flash to the ceremonial gun. And I guess they still had one of these left over the years, and one old fellow built a shadow box, and it hangs in the club room on the wall. And so a lot of these weapons ended up over time being used as drill guns and display pieces or whatever. And the one I had, the short barrel rifle I had, the stock on this is nice. That gun, the stock was beat up, so they must have used it as a drill rifle. I mean, it was in rough shape. I've seen something like it knocked around. It had a good bore on it. And, you know, by the time I think I had to put a firing pin. The firing pin was ground off. So that kind of told me it was used as a drill gun or something. And the bore was fine, but when I did my check, I found out at the very end somebody dropped that gun on the muzzle. And you could hardly see it, but you see where it was dropped and hit, and the end of the barrel was crunched over, or it was damaged. And the only way I found it is when I took a gauge pin and got down, you can see the last almost quarter-inch where this damage was. Because I don't know if somebody might have filed that to blend it in so you couldn't see it. But if you tried to fire that gun, which I was going to do, that would not be a good thing. You know, when it hit that weird spot in the end there, compressed it, it would probably build up pressure and could have created a problem. The gun wasn't safe to fire. I was going to trim the barrel and redo it, but somebody seen it and offered me, wanted it for a study they were doing, and offered me basically what I paid for it. And I got my money out of it and sold it. And I come around and got this one. I was looking for one like this, and I happened to get it kind of reasonable, but looking at it, the reason I did is you can tell it's a parts gun, and we'll go over that when we take a closer look at it here. Okay, if you look at this example, the stock on here is pretty good shape. Okay, the other one I had was a lot worse. If you go back and find the video, you'll see where the stock was bad. It was knocked around. And like I said, we have 3 barrel bands. And another clue is, if you look, somebody went and polished the barrel back bright, because it was probably a darkish brown from patina over the years. The barrels were all bright finished, or armory bright as they call it. But if you look, that barrel band and that spring is pretty much like in mint blue condition, a little bit of rust on there. And on that one, and then when we get to the top, the band is blue, but if you see the spring is been, you know, it's been in there, it's old. Cap's in nice shape. Cleaning rod, don't know if it's real or original, kind of don't matter. I bought this more or less for a type example and to shoot it. The bore's not terrible, it's a little rusty. Probably if I fire it a little, it'll clean up. And no real damage to the muzzle. And we have our standard second conversion action. This is a 2-position tumbler on this. There's only just half cock and safe and full cock. It doesn't have, like on the later models, that little position to get it up off the breech block. So this is a 2-click tumbler, as they say. And of course we have the breech mechanism here, which if you look, this is the lightened version with these 2 cuts in here to lighten the thing lighten the breech bolt. And it's probably a part that was picked up later, because this wasn't used other than if you look up in the history, this was kind of hardly used on an issue gun. So probably when they bought the leftover parts, this was assembled. And as you notice, the breech block's like in real nice shape. But all of this, somebody replaced the screws and everything else here. So it's a parts gun, but I didn't, you know, pay top dollar for it either. Actually not in bad shape, and I noticed there were some parts missing, and I'll get into that later. It's another curious thing about it. There's a few pieces missing that, if you look, there's a hole here where there's a screw missing, and in that little, I forget what they call it, the little interrupter thing, it's kind of like spring-loaded and down in there, holds the cartridge in. Those 2 parts are not on there. When I disassembled the gun, I noticed the stock wasn't inletted for it. So this was a musket stock. Somebody inletted for the little horseshoe spring ejector, that's still in there, but they didn't inlet for that other part, or the screw that goes in there. And I just checked it just now, it's solid wood. So that's something I'm going to have to do to get the gun functional, is inlet that stock a little. Which, again, that's another clue that this gun was built from parts. Somebody took a musket stock and just kind of put it together and got this gun assembled. So it probably was maybe used as a drill rifle or display gun. Maybe they did it deliberately so it wouldn't be fired. Standard butt plate, little rusty. Let's take a look at the other side of the stock and the stampings. And this area here is basically where you'll have the little inspector stamps. And on the 1866s, they can have anywhere from 1 to 3. Because one would be done when it was a percussion musket. When it was converted, it got stamped again. And if it was modified or sent back and reworked, it would get a third one. And the stamps can be various. They're hard to see. And, you know, there are people that will add these things in the fakery and that. But it's pretty nice, you know, to see them on there. The other example, you know, this, it looked like somebody run a rock over the stock. So the stock's in good shape, you know, all the way down. A little bit of monkey business up here. A little cleaning. Like I said, I'm not sure if the cleaning rod's original or not. But, like I said, I believe the screw on the breech block is also a replacement screw. So this is probably assembled from a bunch of different parts. We'll look at your musket style trigger guard and that. And I don't know if there were any other on this model stampings and that should be here, but I don't know, I don't see any. Alright. About the only marking you get is the eagle and the date up here on top of the breech bolt. So that's basically it. Like I said, I didn't pay a whole lot of money for this. It's a pretty nice example. You know, like I said, it still has that old musket style sight on there. It's been cleaned. Once anybody does anything like polish off the rust and that, it really detracts from a gun's collectability and value. But they do it. They don't care. And I'll show you the weird thing about the stock here with a photo illustration. Okay, in the book, this is the gun with the stock off. The A is where the horseshoe spring goes, and B is where that other piece that goes on the bottom of the barrel, and you can see the pin or the screw that holds the lock on. It's cut down in there. On this stock, this inlet section, this for that part isn't there, and the parts were not on the gun. And if you look here where the spoon, the pin and the spoon to hold the cleaning rod in, which was the musket part, well, the spoon's still in there. Now they said they were removed by the government, but I found some in there, so it must be one of the arms dealers or surplus dealers bought musket stocks and inletted them and built these guns. And like I said, this screw and this spring here was missing. Fortunately, there are still parts dealers. I found the parts. They weren't too terribly expensive, and I can get this back working again. You know, this horseshoe ejector part was still on there, and like I said, that A was still inletted, but the B part of the inlet's not there. I'm going to have to take this, get it up on the bridge port, and cut that out, re-inlet it. And then it'll probably be functional, and we'll take it out and try to shoot it or blow it up, one or the other. Okay, so that's my look at the 1866 Allen second conversion musket, the long barrel one. I have an example like that. And hope you enjoyed the video.